Call to order regular council meeting. Hey Ryan, can you mute?
Sure.
You should.
Or you're somebody.
We just have to go to
For October 5th. And in honor of the Leeward Tool, the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Leeward Nation. So on September 28th, Ministerial Order N192, under which the village was able to hold fully electronic measures, expired. The village will be discussing options for amending the council procedure bylaw to enable the ability to hold fully electronic meetings under certain circumstances and allow participation by all council members by electronic means at today's meeting. However, until the proposed changes have been considered, the village has returned to in-person meetings, which will be held in council chambers at the municipal offices. Under the village's current council procedure bylaw, up to 2 members of council may attend the electronic meetings. The public may also attend the meetings in person. However, to ensure adequate social distancing, limited seating is provided. The public may also watch via the Zoom webinar live stream. Today, Councillor Craddock, Councillor Noble, and myself are in person in council chambers. Councillor Antonelli and Councillor Sam will be attending electronically. Staff will be presenting via electronic means. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. And maybe before we dive into it, having said all that, I do want to acknowledge staff, especially Ms. Fraser and Ms. Kennedy, for the work you guys have done over the last 18 months, but getting us back in here. This is not your first job nor your first skills. And you pulled it off again and again for us and you matched all the way on, so thank you. One amendment to the agenda would be the discussion on the Lillooet Bridge and OTI. Maybe put that. See over about that's it. Okay, we'll do that. Any other amendments to the agenda? We're just amended. Discussion, any opposed? I'll be looking up and down there, Councillor Zam and Councillor Antonelli. It's not as obvious, so let me know if I miss hands or questions or anything. Rise with the report from camera, there's none. Adoption of the minutes from regular council meeting number 1545 for Tuesday, September 21st. Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Business arising. None. Business arising from the committee of the whole. Any minutes, delegations, we have none, so that takes us all the way to number 9, staff reports. Office of the CAO, CEO Gilmore.
Hello. So I'd like to start off by first making an introduction. Ms. Kennedy, maybe you could pull in Mr. McCrae. So we have our new manager of development services, Scott McCrae, who joined us yesterday. It's coming. There he is.
Welcome, Scott.
Hello.
Hi. So welcome. So this is everyone. I don't know if you guys want to go around and say
Sure.
introduce yourselves, but
Welcome, Mr. McCrae. You joined us yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, on Monday.
Awesome. So there you are down there. Awesome. Well, I'm Mike, the mayor, and it's a pleasure to have you on board, and we look forward to meeting you live.
I'm absolutely welcome.
Ed Craddock, I'm your neighbor, and welcome to the team.
Hello.
Guys up on the screen there.
Hi, I'm Ika Antonelli. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi Scott, I'm Ryan. Welcome to the team. Looking forward to having you hear what you have to say.
Thanks.
So the first time you guys will see Scott coming in to present, we have quarterly reports coming up in November. I'm not sure what exactly we have on the agenda for the 19th. We might make a guest appearance earlier, but wanted to make sure that we brought him in to meet everyone here tonight.
Awesome, thank you. Again, pleasure to meet you. Look forward to meeting you live and welcome aboard. We'll see you soon.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
We'll see everyone. So you don't have to double check.
Is that here on there then?
Yeah, so I moved that.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's the only mic.
okay.
Okay.
So you-
That would just be the order.
Okay.
Yeah, you, everyone just.
Trying to make it bigger.
Just so that you're aware, the one speaker is in this computer right here, and I've just had a report that it's a little bit hard to hear if there's lots of noise or movement around, and also to speak a little loud.
We'll do that. Okay, the next item, Councillor Craddock, you wanted to have a conversation about the Little White River Bridge. So the discussion was there was some rebar, I believe, is exposed on the bridge, and it's obviously in not very nice shape over the Lillooet. Funnily enough, a staff member had already had a conversation with the Ministry of Transportation, was it yesterday or Friday? Friday. They have that on the docket, so it's actually a Ministry of Transportation capital project. And so it's not anything to do with the maintenance contract that they have. So we can send a letter if we want to try and bump it up, but they're just looking for capital funding. It's actually going to be a very large project, similarly to what we've seen along Highway 99 sort of south. So one lane will be closed for an extended period of time, and then it will be the other lane. So it is on their list. It's just the patchwork isn't working anymore. I think we've seen them do some patches there over the few years, and it just needs a full breakdown to ground zero on that bridge.
So that works slated for next summer or?
I mean, actually, they're going through budgeting right now. So we don't really have a time frame. We could send a letter saying that we've noticed that, we know you're working for it, but we'd like to encourage you to try to find some funds earlier rather than later. Or
And
something
in the
along those lines.
in the meantime, can we make it safer? If they're not gonna see it till next year, and the rebar exposed, I didn't see it, but if it's exposed, there should be something in the interim.
Yes, I would certainly like to see us write a letter. The concern I have, it's a pothole, at least a foot in diameter. And you can see two pieces of rebar sticking out. It's the same information I brought to council last year and the year before. It's the same hole. Certainly they can put concrete in it or something. My concern is I ride a motorcycle. If you're not paying attention, someone hits that rebar, we're looking for a major accident there. So I'm really concerned about, plus it's filled with water. And if we remember what happened in Quebec with the bridges falling down, it was because of water seeping into rebar. So to me, it's a real safety issue. So I'm not sure what the rest of council feels, but I'd like to ask them to get on that a little sooner than a year.
So how about a motion to have staff reach out to Ministry of Transportation staff to reinforce the importance of getting this work done, and that in the meantime, there should be some interim measures taken for safety reasons.
We'll move to that. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Zan.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, I agree with Councillor Craddock and all of his comments he's making there. And I have the same concerns about the time frame. I mean, it's great we can send a letter, but I'm wondering if there's something that we, the village, can do in the interim and then possibly bill it back to the province. Because I haven't seen the pothole myself, but I take Councillor Craddock's word for it that it is quite dangerous. Feeling that this should be dealt with rather soon, as opposed to waiting to hear back from the provincial government. Just wondering what other options we have there to just take care of this ourselves and then let them deal with the bigger picture later on.
It's not our road, and it's a ministry road, a provincial highway, and we would not be allowed to do any work on that without their approval. So there's unfortunately not much we can do. And I think it's outside of our jurisdiction. I think that we have areas on both sides and our residents use it, we use it. So I think it's fair to write a letter. Unfortunately, we know what it's like with capital budgeting and having to try and get it through the budget. But I think if they're hearing some feedback saying this is something that's urgent and we need to have this happen sooner rather than later. I think that's what we can do. Maybe we could bring that up at the SLRB board table too, and maybe they could send something.
Yeah, and we can, in writing a letter, and directing staff to reach out, that could be an email
Oh,
too.
yeah,
That's the
that's
maintenance
easy.
crew, and it doesn't have to be, not saying that.
I agree that we need a short-term fix, 'cause
Yeah.
just yesterday I drove by and saw chunks like this of pavement that were in potholes and were sitting up on the deck, which could take out a cyclist or motorcycle.
For sure. Okay, so yeah, staff will reach out on a couple levels, short term as well. Any further discussion?
I have one more question, Mayor Richmond.
Go ahead.
That letter also go to our local MLA?
Yeah. We'll CC them, him as well.
That's all.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And that takes us to 9B, corporate legislative services. We're talking about electronic meeting formats and proposed bylaw amendments. Ms. Fraser and Ms. Kennedy, and the tag team.
Yes, I'll take it from here, and I will rely on Ms. Kennedy as well for questions. The purpose of this report is to seek input from council on proposed bylaw amendments that will permit the use of electronic meeting formats at future council, committee, and commission meetings. Council will recall at the regular meeting on September 21st, council did indicate support for the use of electronic meetings and for unrestricted electronic participation at in-person meetings. After temporary provisions for the electronic meetings under Ministerial Order 192 have come to an end, which came to an end on September 28th, and new legislation came in on September 29th, this report was drafted in response to the committee's direction and is intended to provide information necessary to move forward. One of the first questions that council asked us to do some research about is whether about the requirement of vaccine passports to attend council committee or commission meetings. So we did receive a legal opinion regarding the possibility of requiring vaccine passports from staff, councillors, and the public to attend in-person meetings, and received a reply that meetings of council board or trustee committees of local authorities is actually exempt from the requirement to show proof of vaccine. So as such, the village will not require proof of vaccine to attend council meetings in person. However, members of the public and when we'll have to wear masks, and when members of the public are in attendance, council members and staff who are at the table will also have to wear masks. That's interim. So in terms of other meetings, as the new legislation and council procedure bylaw do not apply to meetings of commissions and independent boards, staff is recommending that amendments to the Board of Variance bylaw and the Advisory Planning Commission bylaw be brought forward concurrently with proposed amendments to the council procedure bylaw, so that these board and commission meetings may also be held electronically and in a hybrid format similar to what we're doing. So what we would do is amend those bylaws to allow use the same language that we are proposing for the council procedure bylaw. So in terms of the council procedure bylaw amendment, staff have obtained legal advice regarding the amendment to the bylaw to permit unrestricted electronic participation at council meetings and to permit the use of fully electronic meeting formats. The proposed amending bylaw, developed in consultation with the village lawyers, is attached as Appendix A, and a track changes version of the consolidated bylaw is also attached as Appendix B. So under Bill 10, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, fully electronic meetings are distinguished from in-person meetings that include electronic participation. So there's two elements of it. There's the ability to actually hold an electronic meeting and have everybody attend, which we formerly had in our bylaw, but usually related to special council meetings, or in the case of the COVID pandemic in an emergency situation. And then there's the element of allowing people to attend in person or attend a council meeting electronically, which we formerly had, allowing up to 2 members and up to 4 times a year for each member. So We've preserved the distinction of those two elements in the bylaw, the amending bylaw, and added in section 10A, which will permit fully electronic meetings if the mayor deems it advisable or if necessitated by an emergency, the mayor or the acting mayor. So it deems it advisable or if there's an emergency situation such as we've been through, or a local emergency situation, which sometimes occurs. Public notice for electronic meetings, this is something that needs to be noted, is that there is a primary difference between a fully electronic meeting and an in-person meeting with electronic participation with respect to public notice. As an electronic meeting constitutes a change to the published schedule, which is published each year at the beginning of the year, the public must be informed of the change in advance. And as such, if we were to hold a fully electronic meeting, subject to it not being a special meeting, which requires 24 hours advance notice, we will need to advise of this no later than the Friday before a meeting, so that we can provide the appropriate advance notice to the public that the meeting will be held fully electronic. In terms of electronic participation, as per council's direction, the proposed bylaw amendment removes the current restrictions on electronic participation, which I discussed earlier around the limits. And should council find that after following the new bylaw, that restrictions to the number of meetings a member can attend via electronic means would be of benefit, these could be added through a bylaw amendment or in a policy. And council did give us direction to bring this back, bring back the procedure bylaw in 6 months after it's been adopted, so that you can have that conversation. So we will flag that to bring it forward. Something that we wanted to flag with council is that if we are to look at changing the venue for the council meetings, the regular council meetings, pursuant to section 6A of the council procedure bylaw, we do require a resolution in advance of a change of location. So right now we advertise that, and the advertisement we put out at the beginning of the year, once the council agenda for the next year is approved, that all council meetings will be held in council chambers at 7400 Prospect Street. But should we decide to change the location, we will need to get a resolution of council to do so if it should be deemed that we move to a different location and not continue to hold the meetings here. So we would do if it's going to be a series of meetings, then we would get a resolution saying that the following meetings will be held at a different venue. Or if it's one meeting, then we would need to get a resolution, and we'd have to do that either at the previous regular meeting, or we have to call a special meeting to pass that resolution. And then we were asked to look into technology, and we are still exploring various options for hardware that will enhance the meeting experience for remote and in-person participants. We've had sort of costing for initial setup range from anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000, depending on how fancy you want to go, and what kind of video equipment that you would be looking at. We're still researching, and we're not the only community doing so. I understand that there's a lot of RFPs out for this right now. So we will bring back further information once we've completed our research and have some direction or some options to give council and seek your direction. In terms of the room configuration, we've changed the seating around, the table around a little bit in order to be able to show a full view and have the screen so that the chair of the meeting can see those who are attending electronically. And we will obviously be continuing to work with this configuration at this time. We expect that there will probably be some further changes as we move through and figure out how best to use the space. So what we're seeking council's direction in is that council provide direction with respect to the proposed amendments that have been presented. That staff be directed to present an amendment to the council procedure bylaw for first, second, and third readings at the October 19th meeting. If council is agreeable to the amendments that have been presented, and that we also bring forward at that time amendments to the Board of Variance and Advisory Planning Commission bylaw for first, second, and third reading. And that in order to move this forward, we hold a special council meeting, which we can do by fully electronic means under our current bylaw on Thursday, October 21st, the time determined by council to consider adoption of the amended bylaws. We do have a Board of Variance meeting scheduled for the following week. So we are cognizant of the fact that we want to have the ability to hold a fully electronic or hybrid meetings in time for that meeting, which is why we're seeking a special council meeting. This will also allow council to operate in the hybrid system for the November 2nd meeting as well. And if council is agreeable, again, to direct staff to proceed with advertising the council procedure amendment bylaw as per section 94 of the community charter, which is a requirement. Whenever a change is made to the council procedure bylaw, we must advertise 2 weeks in advance of the bylaw being given readings in order to provide notice to the public that we're doing so. And that is my report.
Awesome, thank you so much. Questions, so questions? Any questions on what's been presented? Seeing none, comments? We got just a couple quick thoughts. You mentioned that council gave direction to bring back the procedure bylaw in 6 months to review how this is going. Was it just a procedure bylaw, or were we going to talk about developing a policy around that? What did we decide on?
Initially, it was just to bring back the procedure bylaw and have a discussion, but and then if it was decided at that time, we would develop policy, but yeah.
And with regards to that, with regards to policy around it and tech research in terms of what's available to us, you guys have made it work so far. I just want to personally say my thoughts are to take a little of the stress off of it. We're working, we're functional, hopefully we can keep going, but you know, you mentioned that there's a lot of RFPs out there. I don't want to see staff spend a whole bunch of time that we don't have trying to research all the best. I think to me, the best way to research it is just wait a little bit till the Whistlers and the SLRDs and some of the bigger municipalities have had a chance to see and let them test drive it for us instead of you having to go down rabbit holes of technology and try to find. That would just be my suggestion. If we're able to work, as long as the public's needs are satisfied and we're able to function as a council, I'm willing to, you know, offer some time for staff to figure that out. You know, at the board meeting on Wednesday, they've got some technology what hasn't been set up yet. So they've got the ceiling camera, and then they've got one on the table that we haven't seen yet that pops up. So everybody will have their own mic and their own, you know, you don't have to have a second screen in front of you to do it and that sort of thing. And like you said, it costs anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000. So, you know, that's not in place yet. We're over there. They said it would take probably at least 2 more meetings before that's active. So we had our meeting in person, but it wasn't recorded. It wasn't presented live, which the board members really want to see happen. So all that to say, there's lots of being test driven out there. So let's wait a little bit and see what other folks are doing.
So we had a really good meeting with our IT providers today who have a relatively, they said, I think we would recommend looking at a simple approach. And so they're kind of brainstorming at this point. So it's not doing a lot, it's not a lot of work on our end. And we agree, we don't want to go to the $100,000 model of that. So we're, without us having to do a lot of work, we're just sort of giving feedback. We already had a look at the room. So we might have a few options that'll be relatively painless, I think, to bring forward. That could just make it a little bit more efficient for us. But we appreciate the understanding that it is extra.
One thing that we are cognizant of too is some of these more sophisticated systems require full-time staff to run. Yeah. And we obviously don't have that. So we're taking all of the options into consideration. So.
Go ahead, Councilor Craig.
Well, I don't mind taking a full-time position as the IT person because I'm really handy at this stuff. So the only question I have really is, if the other 2 council members were to come in here, do we have ability in this room to provide that space?
The other thing we're looking at is a potential alternative for a table or seating arrangements to be able to accommodate everyone in the room. So that's another, and those are also, we have funds for those. So that will be coming forward as well. Because at this point, I would say we probably we maybe have to get some banquet tables in here to get set up, and that may work in the interim, but we haven't had a chance to go down that path yet.
And in the meantime, if we exclude the only 2-person allowed, we can survive in here with 1 or 2 people if that's necessary
As a members of the public?
as a council.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, we're not, we will not be required, right now under our bylaw, we require 3 people to be in person to have quorum.
Mhm.
So this will change that.
Okay.
So yes, you could have 3 people on electronic means. The one proviso is the only way that you can have a fully electronic meeting is if the mayor or acting mayor calls it. So not all 5 members of council could attend electronically unless it's a special meeting, which is specific to that, or if the mayor or acting mayor deems that an electronic meeting is required. And that's actually in the community charter, the new bill. So we can't change that. There has to be some people in person.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, let's move through the recommendations. Pardon me?
Councilor
Council-
Antonelli, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say that from my perspective, with you guys in the room and me here, I can hear you just fine, and it's working well for me. So I wouldn't want to see a lot of money spent on a new system that, you know, we may not have the staff to run anyhow.
Thank you. Okay, so any other recommendations? First is provide direction, and that's done. Would somebody like to move the second recommendation that staff be directed to present an amendment to council procedure bylaw 788 2015 for first, second, and third readings at the October 19th meeting of council? Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Caddick. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And next, motion that staff be directed to present amendments to Board of Variance bylaw number 893 2021 and Advisory Planning Commission bylaw 626 2009 for first, second, and third readings of the October 19th meeting of council. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next motion that special council meeting is held on Thursday, October 21st at a time determined by council to consider adoption of the amended bylaw. Moved by,
We need time.
well, we're gonna figure that out right here. Thursday,
We could do it electronically, because it'll be a special council meeting.
right. This morning, nope, I'm looking at yours right there. It's Thursday the 21st.
Yeah, I don't imagine it'll be a very long meeting.
No.
It's just adoption.
Is
I can make adjustments.
it just 9 o'clock for everybody, or? You good with that? Councillor Antonelli, 9 o'clock on the 21st, okay?
Yep.
So moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And a motion that council direct staff to proceed with advertising the proposed council procedure amendment bylaw as required under section 94 of the community charter. Moved by Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Marie. I would like to thank Ms. Kennedy for all of her amazingly hard work on this. It's been a really challenging thing to maneuver through, and she did an amazing job on all the research and pulling together the information. And I just really wanted to acknowledge all the hard work that she did on this, because it definitely hasn't been easy.
Over here. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Okay, we're on 9C, operation. Public Works 3500 dump truck. Is Mr. Chima coming through the hall from down the hall? Okay.
Oh, because we don't have something set up, so
Oh,
everyone
you
can
can
see
see him.
him. So this is the problem we're dealing with the technology.
Gotcha.
We just.
And he beats his head through the door.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Mr. Chima. I can hear you. I can see you.
Good evening. Thanks, Mayor and Council, for having me. I'll try not to speak too loud so you don't hear me through the walls. So I'm here tonight to present to you my report. Basically, the purpose of the report is to seek council's approval to purchase a replacement for our recently deemed irreparable 2004 Chevy 3500 flat deck dump truck. Unfortunately, yeah, this truck has, we've been struggling with it over the last few years. It's a pretty critical truck to our operation. So I've given a little bit of a background here on what we use the dump truck for. In the summer, it's primarily used in parks. It's a smaller dump truck than our plow trucks. So it's quite maneuverable, and it doesn't require the same safety inspections every time it's used. And it's quite useful for getting into parks and smaller spaces for soil and taking away brush. So it's pretty critical in the summertime. Winter, it tends to be more of a secondary plow truck. We fit it with a plow and sander. Although in recent years, we found we're using it more and more often as we're taking on more roads and more responsibilities, such as the airport, Sunstone, and the Ridge roads, that we're using it a lot more for the parking areas and smaller streets. And so it's basically, in terms of year-round usage, it's one of our most utilized trucks. Unfortunately, due to its use in winter, it's seen quite a bit of rust damage, and recently we've taken it into the shop with an issue that essentially is going to cost another $6,000 to fix. I've run some reports on the last 3 years. We've spent over $22,000 on repairing this truck, which is pretty staggering. And I think it's essentially time to retire this vehicle rather than continuing to patch it up. The rust damage is so bad that you couldn't possibly predict what else could happen next, but it's only going to get worse. So I've outlined in this report that we've been looking into options. We've been looking at our immediate needs, but also potentially securing something for our future needs as well. And we've looked at rental options as well as lease options. And as explained in the report, I also have noted that there's been a few projects in the roads maintenance budget that haven't gone through due to supplier shortages and contractors not being able to get some work done. So I have about $25,000 surplus in our roads maintenance budget. And of course, that's not counting. I have set aside a lot for winter operations still, but my estimates are that we have safely $25,000 that we could potentially put down as a down payment on a new truck. We've looked into some lease options, and I've outlined them in this report. Option one is with the down payment of $25,000 for a 36-month lease. That would be a monthly payment of $1,500. Just to put it into contrast, we also looked at renting basically the same truck. It would be about $3,000 a month. So if we were to do that, we would essentially need to rent for 8 months at least until we were to secure through the proper budgeting process, the funding towards a new vehicle. Although that would be 8 months of $3,000 a month that would not go towards a purchase of the truck. So essentially what I'm here to say tonight is that we need this truck. There's absolutely no way getting around it. We've also talked before about our growing parks crew. We're taking on more park space, and so previously we've only had one parks truck, and this was sort of the secondary parks truck, but it's becoming a very essential part of our fleet. So there's no way around it. We need this truck, but it's just around what council is willing to support. I'm hoping that with the options I've presented, that we can go ahead and use the surplus that I've identified as a down payment and then make the lease payments. It would just be a matter of committing to either a 36-month lease or a 60-month lease, depending on council's opinion. So I've also outlined the budgetary impacts for both of the options and the impact on budgeting, staffing. Obviously, it's a higher interest rate than what we would typically go with for MFA, but unfortunately, I understand that our MFA borrowing allowance has been maxed out. So this is still, in my opinion, a better option than renting, with the fact that we know that we're going to need to purchase a new truck next year. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to discuss further. Otherwise, yeah, my recommendation would be to go with the 36-month lease and $1,565.32 monthly payments for 36 months.
Chima. Ms. Gilmore, did you have anything to add from the finance side?
I think just to elaborate on some of the comments about MFA, we only have a certain amount of borrowing that we can do just by different types of borrowing. It's not about a dollar value. So you can do short-term borrowing for, I think it's $110,000. And once that's paid off, and you can go back into that, you can do so many leases, and then that's as much as MFA will allow you to secure. And that's why we're having to look at an alternative going directly through the company that we would be purchasing the vehicle from, which has a higher interest rate for sure. But I did work with Mr. Chima to prepare this information from the finance end of things. And I think having to have some money to put down definitely helps defray the costs of the ongoing lease payments. So if we're able to accommodate that, it's definitely a bonus.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Paddock.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Richmond. I guess that was gonna be my first question, is we're maxed out on MFA, which I guess that happens. It's unfortunate because unless 1%, we're now probably paying 4 or 5, so that's unfortunate. The second question I'd like to ask is, do we not have money in vehicle reserve?
We do not have a vehicle reserve.
So that's another mistake we're making.
That's something that I would like to definitely have a conversation about when we come around to budget this year.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that too, because when I take a look at the roads around the community and still some potholes and things, I know there's some markings on the pavement for upgrades, but that still leaves a lot of holes or not fixing. I hate to see that 25,000 go to the road maintenance budget.
So we do have a road reserve that we have some funds for larger capital projects. I think at this time of the year, when we get into paving projects, we have to be cautious of the temperature because we can only pave in certain temperatures. When we get into October, November, the temperature, they actually close down some of the plants and we're not able to do that. I think this year we've been quite busy with the soccer field and the Bike Skills Park has taken up a lot of staff's priorities. So yeah, there's always a fine balance about how much. If there's a big pothole, obviously we need to get to it, but as we move forward, we'll need to identify priorities and projects on who's going to be able to take some of those smaller repairs. But it's not bumping something if we were to take that 25,000. We're not saying we're taking it and we're not doing something because we want to use these funds for something else.
Okay, and that was my concern because I know looking around the neighborhoods which I walk or ride my bicycle on steady, there's things that could be done, that's for sure. I guess the last question I had for Mr. Chima would be, what's the time frame to get this vehicle in service?
Well, it partly depends. It partly depends on what vehicle we actually purchase. There's a number of vehicles, and sorry, I didn't speak too much about it in my oral presentation, but in the report, I mentioned that there's a leasing company, the same one that would rent the vehicle. So they were the ones that told us that usually around this time of year, they have quite a few trucks that have been used in the parks around the province come in that were being leased or rented for the summer. And so they say that usually there's quite a good selection. There is a couple on there listed right now. We would probably have a couple weeks to see if there was more inventory. They sort of said the first week of October, they would get quite a bit of inventory, and I've already seen 2 new ones come up. So I think we would wait a few weeks, but essentially it could be done rather immediately. I mean, we're still working in the parks and we're struggling right now. I should also mention that we've been using the old bylaw truck that obviously that's been budgeted for a new one, but that truck has also now been taken off the road because of some rust damage, and we're no longer able to use that. So we're actually having to use the office vehicles in times for the public works crew just to get around to check pump times and stuff like that. So I would say it's pretty time critical to get something now. As I mentioned, we could go the rental option, but I just don't like the idea of putting 8 months of $3,000 not towards the purchase of a new one. when we can, we're gonna have to spend the money on a rental, because I don't think that we're sustainable right now. We're having people walking to certain locations. I'm riding my bike to go to inspections, and we won't be able to do that when it starts snowing, that's for sure. But yeah, I think it's pretty time critical, and it could be done fairly quickly.
And I just have a follow-up to Mr. Sema. So we're not getting a new truck, we're getting a used truck, and if that's the case, does it come with any warranty, or are we starting out behind the 8 ball right off the bat?
Yeah, so this is actually where we also bought the new water truck, which was passed in the budget this year, from the water budget. We got a 2019 water truck, so it is lightly used, but they offer 5-year warranty, which we did take in that case, full 5-year warranty for an extra $1,000 or $2,000. It wasn't much, and yeah, so it's the outfit. Like I said, they rent, lease, and sell these vehicles. So the beauty of these vehicles is that they're fully outfitted for this function. I think that's the key that I wanted to stress as well, that if we were to just buy a new truck, we would then have to make quite a few modifications to make it useful for the function that we have it, such as putting a tarp on the dump box, putting tool holders. Essentially, this truck could come in. If we were to buy it tomorrow, the crew could get in it that day and put a few tools in, and then they're ready to go. So that's the benefit of the used as opposed to new.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add one comment that I neglected to say as well from a financial end, is we do already have interest in our current vehicle just for sort of some parts, the one that's not going to be on the road anymore. As per our asset disposal policy, we will list it, we'll put it on our website, but we do have someone who is interested at this point, so that would be some money coming back in that could maybe potentially we can put a bit of a larger down payment or something down, or start put it in an equipment reserve. I wouldn't want to just put it into general, but maybe that's something we could kick it off. But there is some interest, and who knows whether there would be more when we do the advertising on it.
Any other questions? Councillor Zach, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Richmond. Sorry, Ms. Gilmore, I just wanted to confirm that you said if the dump truck is sold, that money can be put back into the purchase. Was that correct?
We can definitely have a conversation at this point. I think we've determined that we have $25,000 in surplus. So if we had something extra, we would ask and say, can we put down the extra money, which would then reduce our lease payments.
Okay, and then Mayor Richmond, if I may, one more question. Through to Mr. Chima. I'm curious, you mentioned there's a lot of rust and whatnot on the current truck, and I'm wondering if the Parks Department is going to see if this truck has the undercarriage coating on it. I just know in our specific area of the province, that seems to be something that's typically done with these trucks. And if this one is specific to snow removal, sanding, salting, if that's going to be something you're going to look into.
Absolutely, it's something that we've been talking about a lot. As council will recall, we just purchased some new equipment as well. The loader being one of our primary snow clearing vehicles, and a lot of it too is ensuring that it's washed down after a big day on the roads as well. So operationally, but as well as our options for like you said, undercoating, or as I said, we do have one specific truck that we've used as reference for this, but we will be looking at what they have available, and we would definitely, depending on the cost and what funds are left, would look into that option for sure.
Yeah, no more questions.
Councillor Milling, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think option number 1 seems like a good idea, and I'd support that, although it's unfortunate that the interest rate is 7.9%. I'm wondering, is this kind of thing going to be covered by our asset management plan?
So what was the question? Will this be, yes. Right now, we're in the queue for our asset management grant, and failing that grant, we have earmarked gas tax, Community Works gas tax funds. to then begin that. We have a contract with a consultant who's going to be bringing us through a formal asset management process, which we'll be identifying so that when we're coming to budget time, we have a list of all of the different assets we have, from, you know, sewer lines to water lines, pump stations, vehicles, whatever, have parks equipment that we can then have for the 5-year and maybe even 20-year capital plan to be developed. And it'll all be developed on risk tolerance from council's perspective on how much we want to then allocate towards reserves and other elements of the budget that will just sort of tie everything together. So that is in the queue. It's been a little bit delayed on this particular grant funding, but they've advised us that they're reviewing our application right now, and we should be finding out shortly.
If I may just add to that point, thanks for your question, Councillor Antonelli, and absolutely, I agree that, and unfortunately, right now, our operations department is dealing with, I think, a lack of the result of not having a good asset management plan. I mean, just looking at our vehicles, I mentioned this is a 2004 truck. I'm sure most of you drive something newer than that. But all of our vehicles are around that era, 2004, 2005, 2011, 2008, 2006. We're reaching the point where we're definitely seeing, you know, we're driving these rusty old vehicles, and unfortunately, there's going to be more of these coming forward in the years to come. So absolutely identifying that, and when purchasing a new vehicle, and this is sort of been my focus, is just bringing the fleet up to the standard that I think we should be at. Frankly, it's embarrassing, some of the trucks that we're driving on the road right now, and for a municipality. So I personally, with the new purchases that we're making, that would go into the asset management plan, which would then forecast when we need replacements. I mean, we've talked also about, for example, in this case, after a 5-year lease or a 3-year lease, we could look at then just getting a new vehicle and a new 3-year, 5-year lease, and sort of have these running ones. I know that the interest rates in this case, this is sort of our only option, but we definitely could look at trading in vehicles before they get to this state, and then, you know, budgeting accordingly. So I think that's critical. And as we're updating our equipment, that's definitely going to tie into the asset management plan.
Thank you. My battery is about to die.
Yes, same here.
This-
So you plugged into that one, is it not turned on? Where is it?
But is the light on in the?
Yeah.
This, I don't think this cable is operating.
Oh, it's not on that one. The end of that one. Over here, this is a port. Well, this is too far, or we could plug it back into that one. Into the power bar.
There's no power on it. I don't think you put power
Electronics.
This isn't going. Okay. I don't think that power bar is working. This lights up.
on.
So we should just power.
Yeah. Can we plug those 3 plugs into Ted's power? Ted's under the table, everybody.
Yeah.
See, this is what you miss when you join us electronically. You don't get to see Ted calling under the table.
Is it working? No.
No, I
Okay, can I unplug all these without any
Yes.
problem?
Yes. Watch out. Into you.
No, it's good. It's easier to work it. Well, I think when you got something on this, oh, sorry.
I'm looking at Leon, I'm just glad I'm not the only one that finds this funny. Having a good time.
Did that hit you in the head, Ted?
No.
Oh, thank you, I missed. There you go, see you
Is it
later.
lit? There you go, thanks,
That
Dad.
could have took the other here.
Oh,
Very good.
Oh, she was at the table too. Very glad. Okay, thank you.
First council meeting, we're all under the table.
We might need to adjust.
I thought that you might be surprised by the sticker shock, but I didn't think you'd be dropping to the floor because of this.
I have a couple questions. So slightly used, or probably talking to Tom about a 3-year-old, 4-year-old vehicle, I would imagine, something like that, it's fair to say. So I guess the question is for council to consider. I'm assuming we will have the vehicle for at least 5 years, if not 8 to 10 years. So I'm just wondering, when we're looking at the numbers here, if we want to take a 36-month loan on it, or spread that out over the taxpayers that are going to use the truck over a more extended period.
Like 5 years?
Like 5 years. So that's my question when we start, if we go ahead with this to look at I'm just wondering if we want to look at five years on that. Second question along those lines, with this lease through Driving Port, or whatever the lease company is, do we have the ability to pay it out at any point and therefore be able to act when we free up space on MFA? Is that something we would consider?
Well, we'll probably won't free up space for another few years anyway.
23 was the first I remember.
The one thing that I would say, because they're probably wanting to get their interest, there would be a penalty and you'd have to pay out interest on it. I don't know, we can definitely ask.
There's a lot of the leases, anyway, it's just a thought, and we have the ability,
Can you
but.
clarify the age of the truck? How old would you say that one would be, that?
The one we were looking at was 2019.
So let's call it a 3-year-old vehicle. Like I said, we're gonna get at least hopefully 5 to 10 years out of it. So yeah, that's just a consideration for council as we're looking at putting the motion forward. If we want to go 36 months or 50 months, I leave that up for discussion.
360.
Or 60 months, right? And then the last thing, we mentioned a lot when we talked about vehicle replacement, but hearing Mr. Chima talk about listing off the age of our vehicles. And really, we're gonna need to buy some, we gotta go through asset management, we have to do what we have to do. But I don't want to get to a point where we replace 2/3 of our fleet over the next couple of years and then start looking at EV. So if we have that many vehicles to change over, and I know we've talked about it and you've had good answers for us before, Mr. Chima, but I just really want to stress that if we have to look at that much change within our fleet over the next few years, it seems like the best time possible to really start looking at how we can electrify our fleet. We buy vehicles now that we're wanting to use for 10, 15 years. Does that mean we're stuck on gas for 15 years? So, I know we don't have the ability now. You need a truck right now, the dump truck. Let's go get it. But I don't want to keep having this conversation every vehicle and go, well, we need this one now. Let's just go get another gas vehicle. At a certain point, we have to draw a line and say we're going to move to electric. So, yeah. That's my comment. Go ahead, Mr. Chu.
I think absolutely. I'm excited by the fact that they've just released some trucks, electric vehicle trucks, and definitely for some of our lighter use vehicles, such as one that might be used as, like I mentioned, the old bylaw truck that we've been using as more of a get around truck, check the lift station, pump run times, etc. Definitely, I think for these types of vehicles, we would absolutely look at that option. I think for this particular one, as you mentioned, the electric vehicle options, I don't think are even there for something this big. Like we're talking a F550, the hauling capacity and dumping and everything else. It wouldn't be a suitable choice for electrification. But also, as I mentioned, there's always the option to trade in and upgrade, and that's something that I'd like to look at, when we do make new purchases, that trade them in while you can still get quite a bit of money back, and then have a fleet that's constantly being, you're not ending up in the state that we're in now.
No, like I said, I just don't want to keep out of necessity renewing our vehicles gas one at a time. Like I said, at a certain point we need to draw that line, and I hope we're moving. I know we have capacity issues and we have a climate action plan, but I want to see us draw that line at a certain point. That we look at electrifying, and you'd be surprised, by the way, Mr. Chima, the hauling capacity of electric vehicles now. You go to places like Norway, their excavators, their massive excavators are electric. The technology's out there. I know right now we don't have the funds for something for that sort of thing, but it's coming and it's getting cheaper, and the capacity is much greater than it's ever been. So I want to be there and ready as a small municipality.
I remember we did talk about this when we were discussing the bylaw vehicle earlier this year when we we're going through budget.
And so what we are looking for is, obviously we need infrastructure here, so we have our eyes peeled for grants for getting that ready so that we can get the vehicle and be ready to charge. So we did talk about that, and we do still have that on our radar. At least for some of the commuter vehicles that are a little more easy to get as far as electric vehicles, as opposed to, I mean, it'll come with the large vehicles, but
Okay, any further comments or questions, or would somebody like to put a motion on? Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I'll move option number one, the 3-year.
So you like the 3-year over?
Well, I do, just because we're paying such a high interest rate. If we were through MFA, I would say yes, push it out, but we're paying too much for interest rates.
$4,000 more.
Yeah, so I'd like to see it in the 3 years.
Seconder, any discussion? Go ahead, Councilor Sand.
Second motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Or question, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chima.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a nice evening.
Okay, we're on to 9D, Development Services. We have some staff joining us.
Hello, everyone.
We were on the summary of the public hearing report for the OCP Kaya École de la Vallée Amendment Bylaw 902. Ms. Pedrini.
Thank you. So the purpose of the report tonight is to provide council with a summary of the verbal and written submissions that were made during the public hearing, and that was held on September 27th. And this is pursuant to section 465(5) of the Local Government Act. So bylaws were presented and for first and second reading on June 1st, 2021. And at that time, council had established some certain prior to obligations that would be contingent on final approval of these bylaws. The bylaws have been prepared to amend our official community plan and the zoning bylaw to facilitate the development of a French first language school on Lot 3, District Lot 203, Lillooet Land District Plan 12807. So at the time, one of the prior two conditions was that the CSF, I won't try to butcher that, but the School District 93 contribute towards a pedestrian bridge that would cross Pemberton Creek, as this was an expectation in the official community plan of the development of this lot. So at the time of the public hearing, staff presented a report to basically let council know that the applicants had sent correspondence to the village, letting staff know that this obligation was going to be very difficult to provide, and that it could actually prevent the success of the project because they are dependent on funding from the Treasury Board, and that funding has very strict criteria. And the contribution towards a pedestrian bridge would not fit the funding criteria of the Treasury Board. So this detailed staff report is attached to my report tonight as Appendix A. And this isn't new information, as it was presented to council during the public hearing. So actually, the night of the public hearing, there were 27 written submissions received in support of the two amending bylaws, and one letter received in opposition to the bylaws. On the evening, 4 verbal submissions were made by members of the public in favor of the proposed bylaws. So the majority of those who expressed support for the French school noted that the current lack of dedicated facilities for the existing École Le Vallée was troubling to the parents, and that they had concerns with crowding, and also ensuring their constitutional rights to have school facilities that are just as proper as what the English students in Pemberton currently enjoy. So a copy of the public hearing minutes are attached to the report as Appendix B. And at this point, should council wish to consider revising their original resolution by removing the condition that the School District 93 be solely responsible for providing the pedestrian bridge over Pemberton Creek, there has been wording provided here for your consideration. And what else can I let you know? So the communications have been, community engagement and consultation process for both bylaws has been outlined earlier, and the community has been engaged through a public information session, as well as the ability to attend the public hearing. So as all the legal considerations have been met via the Local Government Act, at this point, I would recommend that council receive this summary of public hearing, and that there is also wording provided as a recommendation if you wish to consider revising the prior to rezoning obligations, specifically 1B and 2B of your original resolution passed to support first and second reading of the bylaws. So thank you, and I am able to answer any questions of clarification, but if your question results in sharing of new information, I am not able to answer those types of questions.
Thank you, Ms. Virginia. Any questions?
Apparently we can't have any.
Well, if they're not new, it doesn't lead to new information. No question?
I guess the only question I would have, and I don't know if you can answer it, have we been in touch with the École de LA to make sure that this amendment's going to meet the requirements for Treasury Board?
Mr. Drainey, do you want to address that?
You know what? I didn't quite catch that. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So we have been in touch. They're attending this evening as well. And we have had conversation, and that will satisfy, as long as it's not a condition that needs to be obligated prior to rezoning, that the Treasury Board cannot commit to funding, then this allows them, this change allows them to move ahead.
Good, and that's exactly what I want to hear. I want to make sure that we're not doing this and they're still in a situation. So I'm quite happy with that, and thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do have one question.
Okay.
We were just talking, Ms. Virginia, we were just having a conversation, Ms. Fraser and I. Yes, you guys are having a conversation. But we still want to be retained. We still want statutory right-of-way access on the property, don't we?
Yes, we do.
But we just don't want the financial commitment, or we aren't able to secure the financial commitment for the bridge. But we still want to maintain that passage through the property.
Yeah, so the statutory right-of-way to provide public access to the Pemberton Creek crossing would still be desired by the village.
This is the resolution talks about amending it to be.
Right, yeah, okay.
So I think
I'm just-
1A should be removed, but 2B should remain.
I think 1B should remain,
Okay.
and
Okay,
2B, so
Sorry,
2B, yeah, refers to the statutory rights of way to provide public access. I'm just reading it aloud here, to pedestrian cycling trail links to the Valley Loop Trail, Lot 13, and the Pemberton Creek crossing. Yeah, that should remain.
Okay. We're just
Catch.
gonna be.
To be or not to be?
Okay. Any comments? Okay, none. Would somebody like to start by moving receipt of the public hearing report? Moved by Councilor Noble, seconded by Councilor Antonelli. Go ahead, Councilor Antonelli.
I had some comments.
Go ahead.
I think it might be hard to hear me because your computers are repeating what I say. So if you mute it, it would probably be better. Did you catch that? Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. All right, well, what I'd like to say is that at the public hearing, I heard a lot of parents saying, we'll fundraise for the bridge. We want our school. And I really understand that. I want to support the school, and I do through this. But I just wanted to say that I don't think it's the responsibility of the parents to fundraise for that bridge. That bridge was an obligation of the developer, the adjacent landowner, and I just don't want that to be forgotten. I don't want the obligation now transferred to moms in Pemberton, because that's not the way we should be operating. So I hope next time we're in this situation where we're looking at taking covenants off of title, we really think to the future and who then will be responsible for these amenities, because from my perspective, it is really important to get those kids off the railway bridge and off the highway bridge. So I'm satisfied with the wording, continue to collaborate with these parties. So I'll support it because I understand how much the community wants this school, but I am really disappointed at how this bridge may or may not be coming forth now.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a mover and a seconder for the receipt of the public hearing report. Any further discussion on that one? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we will look for a motion. The council considers revising the original resolution with respect to prior rezoning obligations, specifically 1B. So that the prior to rezoning obligation 1B for zoning bylaw EP2, 2018 amendment Tayada École de la Vallée, bylaw number 903, established by council resolution at the regular meeting 1539 held on June 1st, 2021, be amended to read as follows. Pedestrian and cycling trail links to the Valley Loop Trail, lot 13, and that CSF continue to collaborate with staff, adjacent landowners, and the province to deliver a public pedestrian permanent crossing. So we'd like to make that motion. So no, second by Councillor Zant. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, I have the same concern as Councillor Antonelli. It seems over the years that Tayada has found a way to meet most of their obligations at this point in time. We haven't had the sidewalk put in, but I know that's in a future agreement. But I also am concerned that we're putting this bridge onto a third party that was not part of the agreement with the Village of Pemberton Council when we put this in place. And I think they're passing off a responsibility that they should be providing, and it shouldn't be put on the school. So I'm still not sure that I'm happy with the way this is set out. It's fine that the school's going to collaborate with staff, adjacent landowners, but if the adjacent landowner doesn't come through with the majority or all of the costs of the bridge, then I'm not too sure I'm happy about going ahead with this. I want to support the school, and this won't stop the school from going ahead, but I want to see the adjacent landowner be more responsible for the cost.
Okay, any other final comments? Call the question, any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Dreamy. So we're on to number 10 now, bylaws, 10A. There's no staff presentation on this. This is a follow to the previous discussion. Village of Pemberton Fish Community Plan Bylaw 654, Tayada École de la Vallée Bylaw 902. The recommendation is that Village of Pemberton be given, third reading on that. Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Zant, any discussion? Opposed? Motion carries. And then the next is that Village Permanent Zoning Bylaw number 832, 2018, Code de la Vallée, bylaw number 903, beginning third reading. Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Ms. Virginia. Have a great night. Bylaws for adoption on 10B, 10B1. Village of Permanent Tax Exemption Stewardship Permanent Nature Center, bylaw number 906. We're looking for a motion to adopt. Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we're on number 2, Village of Permanent Board of Variance bylaw 893, amendment bylaw 907. Looking for a motion to adopt. Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And the last one is Village Permanent Fees and Bylaw, Charges bylaw number 905, amendment Board of Variance bylaw number 908. Motion to adopt, moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thanks everyone. So we're on to 11, Mayor's Report. One of the shortest Mayor's Reports ever. Is that coming from?
No, not at all.
I'll just fill in some of the gaps. I mentioned a couple of times that I was at a regional district meeting. It was fairly light agenda. But just a couple items really quickly. I'll run through them, and if anybody has questions, then just ask. I don't want to spend too much time. But up in the Tayax area, Goldbridge area, the Tayax Adventures was given a renewal for the temporary use permit to allow for commercial float plane tours and associated uses. So that was provided 3 years ago. This is a re-up of that TUP. And there was also a TUP awarded in Area D, and this is for a temporary food service establishment at the site of the old Galliano. Is that what it's called? No, is that what it's called?
I think so.
No, it starts with a G. The old coffee shop in Britannia Beach.
Oh, yeah, the one right down.
Galliano?
I think it was. I think it was Galliano, yeah.
So yeah, they asked for a TUP to put some back there. I'm not sure what the arrangements are. I know there were septic issues, but they've got those apparently resolved, otherwise it doesn't go through. Temporarily, pardon me, to while they're looking at further development up there, and then that area would change. So that was passed. There was a discussion with the board. It was brought up in relation to recent events in Area C, but it became a regional conversation. And it's about some of the pop-up raves and parties that we've seen on properties around the regional district. There was one in Area C about 2 weeks ago now, I guess it was. And they're very coy about it. They pop up really quickly. There was a conversation at the table about enforcement and what our bylaw can possibly do, which is pretty little. But just more ended up talking about how we can coordinate as a regional district with the RCMP, because Squamish Valley is seeing a lot. They've got a rotation, right? They're moving these parties around, especially in the summer. There's concern on forest fire as well as disruption of neighbors. So this is a bit of an ongoing conversation there. There were some affordable housing amendments made in Area A and Area D. We looked at a noise regulation bylaw for Area A because they don't have one currently. The request for permissive tax exemption for our shooting range for permanent wildlife was approved. And I think that's all I have from that meeting. Particular interest. Yeah, I don't feel like I have much else on our VCH meeting. I think a lot of numbers that I think you all have in terms of infection rates and all that sort of thing. One interesting number to me though was that in the VCH district, and this is last Friday, I guess it was. 92% of the BCH residents have gotten their first dose of the vaccine, and 85 have received their second dose, which is higher than the provincial average, and it continues to go up. And the ongoing conversation is still around, okay, the clinics are becoming fewer now, the availability of the vaccine is becoming tougher. So how do we keep getting those numbers up? So a lot of mayors on the calls have been concerned about, okay, this is good, this is positive, and how do we keep increasing those numbers if it's getting harder and harder to receive the vaccine, especially if you're already hesitant and reluctant. So lots of conversation around there that I think will carry on, I presume. And just in general, the flu season's at the door. Even at our little clinic, there's been respiratory cases coming in. You know, the weather, we're going to see more of that. So there's still concern with the numbers, obviously, of infections, about our healthcare system, our hospitals, especially as we get into that flu season and keeping up with surgeries. That was the essence of that conversation. I think maybe just mention, of course, this past Thursday was the first, on September 30th was our first day to recognize Truth and Reconciliation, and I'm hopeful that people took time to acknowledge the hundreds of kids that were discovered in unmarked graves this year, the thousands of survivors of residential schools. And I'm hoping that we all use September 30th to look forward to ways to continue to acknowledge, understand, and learn about colonial rule, about colonial policies that are still in place, the Indian Act, and the ways we can really actually concretely move ahead with reconciliation. And I look forward to, and I think it's on the books, but I just wanted to ask, I know we talked about Canada Day and how we can look at that differently next year, and then we talked about September 30th next year. How are we going to have a conversation about how we can acknowledge September 30th next year in Canada Day celebrations? How do you see that?
Well, we have that as a council resolution to take forward to bring it back. Yeah.
So we're going to bring that forward in later in the winter, or something.
So that we're ready,
so
not
that
that
we're-
we're scrambling. So
Yeah,
that
I don't
we
want-
have a plan.
Yeah, I want to give staff enough time. Okay, good. And that's it for me. Go ahead, Councilor Noble.
Well, it's on the same theme. I don't know if everybody had a chance to read the article I sent out on that topic, but I thought that was a really good idea, something we could look into for September 30th next year. It seems like it might be really good budget-wise, might not be that expensive, and people could get in on it from everywhere, like it was a Zoom thing, which was done by Prospera Credit Union in Okanagan for all their employees. And they had like keynote speakers and breakaway groups and stuff for learning. And I thought that was an amazing idea that I would really love to see us look into that.
Thank you. And maybe a bit of a segue, sorry, I missed this in our SRD meeting as well, so on the same lines, kind of. We were, the SRD was approved funding for the next C2C Nuquantois gathering. So,
The other thing we have is we have funding through UBCM, I think, as well, for sort of staff training on for Indigenous students. So I think just COVID, they didn't feel it would be very good for a virtual situation in that particular setting. So UBCM has allowed us to defer that until we're able to get into sort of a room and actually undertake additional training. So that'll be in 2022, I guess we'll be bringing that forward.
And we've also asked that staff bring back in the near future a report on where we're at with our actions.
Yep, that's partially drafted.
Reconciliation action, so we'll be able to have a conversation. Awesome. Is that it for you, Councilor Noble? Any other council reports? Then we are on to correspondence for information. We don't have any for action. Would anybody like to pull any out? I'll pull out 13A. Would somebody like to move receipt, or 13A1, sorry. Would somebody like to move 13A2 for receipt? Councilor Paddock, seconded by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. We've had a couple conversations about this. I just didn't want to receive this. I just want to reassure, we've had conversations at this table, conversations with residents. We want to make sure the folks along Frontier Street who will be potentially impacted by having a basketball court down in that area are well informed of our plan. The plan is not formed at this point in terms of exactly where it goes and how it's going to look and what the hours are going to be and all those sorts of things. People are anxious to hear about it. So I just want to make sure that we're very aware that the people on Frontier Street are especially interested, and we want to make sure that when we do have a plan, that we're going to pass that on, communicate it. So instead of just receiving this, I'd like to see us respond with, just that we will, when our plan is developed, we will make sure to inform residents of the Frontier Street.
So correspondence, staff respond.
Yeah. Just letting them know how and when they'll be informed.
And that we're taking all the concerns into consideration
Yeah.
going forward.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Just to follow up on that, would they be involved in the outcome or just informed of what was going on?
I think, the idea right now is to put a plan together and present it. If there is, a large amount of opposition to our plan, then we would certainly consider that input. That's why we want to inform, and we want to put together a thoughtful plan in advance to make sure that it's an inclusive asset, that people can watch, that it's well sheltered, that it's well managed, so that the lights are off at a certain time, the gate locks at a certain time, it doesn't disrupt, and then we can present that plan to the neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
And I think the important thing to note is that we understand the importance of having some overflow and large vehicle parking. And the intention is not to try to displace that any further, but to be able to have balance, to be able to maintain pieces. We have tourists coming in, we want them to be able to park and walk around town and enjoy whatever, whether they're shopping or eating or, grabbing coffee. So that will be taken into consideration as well.
And we've also discussed, the CIO and I have had conversations, and we have here too, obviously, just to make sure that we have a work plan in months to come for us to do a visioning exercise of everything else along that property. We don't want it just to become a defunct parking lot because it's easy. What do we want to see from that strip of property, for the future? And we really need to workshop that at a committee of the whole and start to see what we can come up with there. So as we said, there's lots of interest in it from local groups. Would somebody like to make a motion to respond? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, we have none. Notice of motion. Question period. So the regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. So if there are any questions from members of the public attending the Zoom webinar, please click on the raise hand feature in your webinar controls. This will notify our staff that you'd like to ask a question, and they'll unmute your microphone when it is your turn to speak. Ms. Kennedy.
No, Mayor Richmond, we have no questions.
Thank you. In that case, I'll look for a motion to go on camera, please. Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Noble, and closed. On camera.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, I'll reopen the regular council meeting and look for motion to adjourn. Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock, any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Good evening.